Where was I when? Depends which day you're at.
I have no idea. Okay, good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Shavuos Daf Yud. Really, this blot could have just been pulled out of Maseches Nida. We're going to be spending the day talking about a sugya of what we refer to in the general learning world as Poresh Be'ever Meis. And the case is where, in the midst of Tashmish Amita, a woman realizes that she is Poreses Nida, that she gets her period. And at that point, the continuation of Tashmish Amita becomes Asar Midoraisa. It's an Asar Kares. I ones Rachmana Patre, because what he's supposed to do, you didn't know that she was going to become a Nida. When you started Tashmish Amida, you didn't know. Now she is in the so what do you do? So the Gemara here says that we have a discussion in the Amorim Itmar, 7-8 lines from the bottom on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Abai Amar Mishmei de Reb Chia Barav Chayiv Shtaim. You're chayiv 2 korbanos, chatas in this case. V'chein Amar Rava Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Shiva Amar Rav Huna Chayiv Shtaim. Chada aknisa, v'chada aprisha. One for beginning Tashmish Amita, and one for exiting the body during Tashmish Amita. Says the Gemara, Habiba Rabba b'mai, ilema samuch levesta. If you want to say that her period was close, that she knew she was going to be getting her period at some point soon, well then, who are we talking about? Uvaman. Ilema b'tamid chacham bishlama knisa lechayev. Okay, he didn't know she was going to become a nida, but it was a poor decision because she was likely to become a nida. So that's a din shogeg lechayev. He gets a korban. Kasavar, his svar was yicholani livol. I'll be able to have tashmish amita with her before she's poreses nida. That's why. Okay, so he thought he was going to succeed, but he failed. But she wasn't a nida when they started tashmish amita. So what's the din? He gets chayav a korban. It was a shogeg. His intention wasn't to do the avera. Ella aprisha, but if she becomes a nida in the midst of tashmish amita and he's poresh be'ever chai, if there's still a kishui when he leaves the body, so there's hana in that kishui, that exit, the yitzia, is tashmish amita with a nida. It says the Gemara, there's no korban in that case. Mezidhu. No korban in the case of mezid. So what exactly is our case? And v'iba'am ha'aretz, if the man who was with this woman doesn't really know halacha, then idi v'idi, both the knisa and the yitzia, it's the same thing as achal shnei zeisei chele b'helam echadu. It's only one error. It's not two, because he's an am ha'aretz. And he doesn't know the difference between the isurim of knisa samach levesta and yitzia b'kishvi. He's an am ha'aretz. So it's not 2 isurim by him, it's one. It's only one helam, it's only one korban, because it's both the same lack of yediyas. So if that's true, then what case are we dealing with? Ve'ela, perhaps we're discussing a case on Yud Ches Amud Aleph, 2 lines down, b'she'ein samach levesta. Maybe we're talking about a case where really she was nowhere near her getting her period, nowhere near the end of the month. Well, here too, uvaman. Ilema b'talmud chacham v'lo chad lo mechayev. He won't be chayev on anything. Akanisa, he wasn't expecting her to get her period, so that's onus. That's not his fault. And Aprisha, he's still amazing, right? Because he's a Talmud Chacham. He knows if she says Nitmesi in the middle of Tashmish Amita, he knows he's not allowed to do that. And Iba'am Ha'aretz, if we're talking about a case of Ein Samach Levesta and the man we're talking about is Nam Ha'aretz, then Chaduhu D'Mechayev, Aprisha, he'd only be Chayev on the Prisha. Why would he be Chayev on the Prisha? Should be amazing because he's Nam Ha'aretz. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So because she says, I'm a nida, he says, okay. So he pulls himself away from her body. But the yitzia has hana, it's only a din shogeg. If you're Talmud Chacham, it's a din mezid, and there's no korban, because you're a Rosh Gomer, you know exactly what the din is. You're having tashmish amita with a nida. So basically, we're left with this quandary of what is the case where we're chayiv shtayim? How can you be chayiv 2 korbanos shogeg? It doesn't make sense. We've analyzed both in the category of Samach Levesta and She'ein Samach Levesta, and within each bucket from the perspective of the Talmud Chacham and the Hamaretz, and there just isn't a case. So Hadar Amar Rava responds, don't worry. La'olam, what are we talking about b'Samach Levesta? Really, we're talking about a case where she was close to her Veses, Uve Talmud Chacham, and he knows halacha, but he's not a big Talmud Chacham. The Talmud Chacham lezu, ve'ein Talmud Chacham lezu. He knew the halacha that he wasn't supposed to be with her in regards to being close to her veses. He shouldn't have done that, though she wasn't a nida yet. And if she's poreses nida, that's a din shogeg. But when it comes to the prisha, he didn't know. And in both of those cases, there's a din shogeg. And because there's a din shogeg in both of those cases, you can get your 2 chatos. We'll see later in the Gemara what you're supposed to do in such a case. Amar Rava. Rava says, V'tarvayu taninu. Both the case of Knisa Tanina and Prisha Tanina. We have Mishnayos, we have Brisas that speak both about the case of Knisa, of beginning Tashmish Amita, as well as the case of Prisha, of ending Tashmish Amita. Prisha Tanina Diktani. Here we have a Mishnah. We learned this already on Daf Yudal and Beis. Hayamishame Shim Tahora. This is talking about the Prisha. If he's mishamish with tahora, let's say it was the night that she went to the mikvah, she's not supposed to be poreses nida. And v'amar la nitmesi, she has a hargasha. By the way, nowadays, if a woman says in the middle of Tashmish Shemitah today, now, if a woman says nitmesi, it's an irrelevant comment in the Maisa. You should listen to her because you should be a mensch. But halachically, we don't have a din of hargasha nowadays. We assume that a woman can't sense the hargasha that generates a din deoraisa. Hargasha plus dam, we assume that cannot be felt anymore. And certainly, when confounded by the physical contact of Tashmish Shemitah, for sure, you can't argue hargasha. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva about this, that if a woman is cleaning herself after urination and she wipes very soon after urinating and sees blood, he's a shtickl choshe, so that the feeling of urinating might mask a hargasha and create for nida d'oraisa status, which is very rare. So one of my rabbeim used to say, if she's tahora, just get colored toilet paper. And in Eretz Yisrael they sell. It's hard to get it here. You can order it on Amazon, but in Eretz Yisrael they sell it. And I remember him like yelling at the guys, like, guys, how many kulas am I supposed to hand out? Go get some colored toilet paper. Why is this complicated? So he would like rail on the guys in yeshiva who are like not paying attention. The guy just like deer in the headlights. Just be smart about it. You're trying to get in trouble. Just go get colored toilet paper. So, in any case, the prisha that we're talking about is this case of hayameshamishim tahora v'amralo nitmeisi upiresh miyad chayev. In that case, remember, only if he's piresh miyad. Why piresh miyad? Because he still has a kishui, and the hana of the yitzia is like the hana of the knisa. The movement is hana, and therefore chayev. So that's the side of the prisha. What about Knisa? What about the beginning of Tashmish Shemitah? Tanina, that too. Nimtza al shelo. This is a little nuanced. We learned about this in Maseches Nida 6 years ago. Says the Gemara that if after Tashmish Shemitah he finds dam on himself, so he would take a cloth of some kind and clean the Ever Tashmish post Tashmish Shemitah, and he sees that there's some blood, the halacha is tmeyin v'chayovin b'korban. So this is a problem because where did that blood come from? Obviously from Tashmish Shemitah with Anida. Nope. This is just post. Well, I've gotten this shaila from young couples who are none the wiser, and they on the body they saw that she's Anida d'oraisa. That's abdika shebabdikos. That's mamash abdika. So she's Anida d'oraisa at that point. So says the Gemara, Nimsa al shelo tmeyin v'chayavim b'korban, because Pashut they had Tashmish Shemitah when she was poreses Nida, obviously. My love, obviously, this is a case of B'samach Levesta B'Aknisa. It must be that case is talking about where he was not smart. He was too close to when she expected her period, and they were together. So that's Knisa. So that's why we have a Marimakum for Prisha and a Marimakum for Knisa. Amar the Ravada Bar Masna l'Rav, I disagree. L'olam Emelach, that this case that you called the case of Knisa, of Nimsa al Shalo, no. That case, I would say, is B'Shelo Samach Levesta B'Aprisha. Lav Dafka, I could read it in two ways. He found out in the middle that it doesn't say that, but he found out in the middle that she was nitmeis. And then, yes, there's dam on him, but it's not because he was irresponsible. It could have been shelo samach levesta, and it was just dam that happened in the middle. With that, no one's fault. These things happen sometimes. If you want to argue, well, if that's true, I don't need two mishnayos, both for prisha. Remember, the first one for Prisha was Hayamasham Meshim Tahora. The one that we thought was Knisa was Nimsa al Shalo. But according to the way Rav Ada Bar Masna's learning, he's saying that could also be a case of Prisha. But then why do we need both? We already have a case of Prisha. So the Gemara says a quarter of the way down, a third of the way down on Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph as follows. No, we actually need two cases of Prisha. Why? Because there's another case. Nimsa al Shalo. Let's say that after Tashmish Shemitah, A woman does a bdika. As a general rule, a woman should never do a bdika without asking a rav, other than the obvious bdikos during Sheva Nakim. A woman should do a total and a regular menstrual cycle, and a regular Tara cycle, should do a total of 15 bedikos. She should do the hefsek Tara to go from the 5 days of bleeding into Sheva Nakim, and she should do 2 bedikos every day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all during daylight hours, after Nates in the morning, before Shkia in the afternoon. Totals 15. There are kulas to not do every day if there's bleeding problems, whatever the case may be. So when you see the Gemara talking about that she did an extra bdika, that doesn't mean that we go home and keep those halachos. You never do a bdika unless a practical, prominent Orthodox shul rav tells you to do so. If she does a bdika after tashma shemita and she finds blood, well then it's tmei misafek. Now remember, they just had tashma shemita and she sees blood. Unlike him, where if he sees blood after tashma shemita, it means that they cohabited while she was in Nida. If she finds blood afterwards, what does that mean? Suffolk. Was she a Nida when they were together? Or no, is this new blood? We don't know. Tmei misafek uptur min korban. And ba'aydi debai misnam nimtza al shalom. Because of that case, tananami nimtza al shalom. Therefore, we use the same language of nimtza. It's very dangerous language to just use nimtza al shalom because the cases are drastically different. But that's how he wanted to learn the. That's why he wanted to say we needed both cases of prisha. How can you learn that brisa that is talking about prisha? What does the Mishnah say? Nimtza ktani. So if you look back up a few lines, what does the brisa say? Nimtza al shela. What does it mean when someone says nimtza that they found blood? When are they talking about? Before, during, or after? It's not before. During is the wrong language. That should be nitmesi. Nimtza, I found blood, sounds like an ex post facto after tashma shamita. So the Gemara calls it out. It says, the Brisa says, "V'ha nimtza ktani, v'nimtza lebasar hachi mashma." Nimtza, a person says, "Oh, I just found blood." What are they talking about as it relates to tashma shamita? After tashma shamita. V'i aprisha meikara kiparish le meikara havi leidiyah. If what you're saying is that it's prisha, that means he knew in the middle of tashma shamita that she was nitmeis, that she became tmeya. So it says the Gemara, Amar le Rava. Rava says to Rav Idi, "Tzayis ma'iduk amar Rabcha." You really should listen to your Rebbe, to what Ravina is saying, because again, Rav Ada wanted to say that the second Bryce was talking about prisha. Ravina, his Rebbe, wanted to say no, it's talking about knisa. Amar le Rav Ada bar Ava says to Rava, "Heichi matzis, how can we say that we're talking about knisa? After all, the Tanya Allah, we have a brisa. The brisa says, "Zohi mitzvah saseh shebenida shechayaven aleh." There, in it's actually Ditnan. I think it's Ditnan. Nope, it's not. It says Tanya. The brisa says, "Zohi mitzvah saseh shebenida shechayaven aleh." That what's that talking about? The imisa. If Ravina is right that we're not in the brisa talking about prisha, but rather talking about knisa, then it should be mitzvahs lo saseh. If we're talking about knisa, the beginning of Tashma Shamita, hello, it's state in Chumash, don't sleep with Anida. That's pretty easy. So that language makes sense of the lo saseh. But then we don't have the continuing language of aseh. What's the aseh? So says the Gemara, Amar le, this is the same thing as Chasuri Mechsar b'hachik tani. Itanisa chaser v'tani hachi. Very nice, unique, we got different syntax, but still, same idea. It's, what? Yeah, it's exactly right. It does the same exact function. Zoe mitzvahs lo sa'aseh shebenida shechayaven aleha. What is that case? Is that that first case of nida of knisa is the lo sa'aseh, don't sleep with a nida. And what about the next case? We're 2/3 of the way down. We had said that if a man was mishamesh with a tahora, and then in the midst of tashma shamita she says nitmeisi, and then upiresh miyad he's still be'ever chai, he has a kishui still chai, and zohi mitzvahs aseh shebenida, it's the aseh of prisha when she says she's in nida in the middle of tashma. So the lo aseh is don't cohabit with a woman who's close to her period. The aseh is that if you do and she becomes an nida in the middle, you have an aseh to be porish, but you have to do it the right way. Now we're going to discuss what the right way is. This can happen if a woman knows for sure she's bleeding during Tashmish Amita. Amar Mar, Piresh Miyad Chayev. We said in the Brisa yesterday that if a woman indicates to the Baal that she was poresis nida b'shas Tashmish Amita, we said that if she's Piresh Miyad Chayev, says Gemara, Hey Chiyavid, what do you want the person to do? So Amar Rav Huna Mishmei de Rabba, Noetz Eser Tzipornav Bekarka. You should place your 10 fingers into the ground ad sheyamus, until the aver is yamus, aver mace, namely that there's no kishui anymore. Vituvia, and this will be good for you. This is like the levels of Yosef Atzadik, because any movement with a kishui is an isser kares. Again, this is a very complex dynamic, okay? This is not like a normal scenario. And again, we wouldn't normally know because the women in our generation don't really have hargashos. But again, if you knew, the halacha is that you're poresh be'ever meis. Omar Rava, and Rava makes a diuk from here, which is a remarkable diuk. Let's look at what we said. We just said that if a couple is together and a woman is nitmeis in the middle of Tashmish Amita, she tells her husband nitmeisi. So what does he do? He waits until it's aver mace and then he can leave the body, right? That means that if it's aver mace, that there's no isser kares of nida. That's the implication. There's ha'ara, just full, their intercourse. But it's not considered to be an isser kares. It's a chiddush, no? We know ha'ara, if that's neshika, if it's knisa sa'atara, we said you're chayav kares, you're done. But here, the Gemara distinguishes between aver chai and aver mace. Afal pi, that in both cases, there's a knisa of the atara b'fnim. So it may be an ones, but the Gemara distinguishes between the two. So why doesn't the ones apply to both cases? The distinction between tashmish amita be'ever chai, which they're calling, the Gemara would refer to as kares, amazed, and leaving the body be'ever mace is the difference between being chayiv and not chayiv a korban. That means iser doraisa, not iser doraisa. So look at the zosameres. Amarava, zosameres, hamashames mace be'arayos pater. That if a person is having intercourse, but it's be'ever mace, then you're pater. The isal kedaita chayiv, if you want to say that tashmish amita be'arayos, even be'ever mace, if you want to say that that's chayiv by arayos, hacha my time of pater, then over here by the woman who says nitmesi, and he waits until he's now be'ever mace, that movement is still pater. That means it's an isser derabanan. It's not an isser derais anymore. That's a hafla of a fella. That means that the ha'ara is not the isser. It's totally, drastically different than any havamina we would have had. So says the Gemara, hacha my time of pater. Over here, why would we say a pater? Says the Gemara, no, it's not true. They're all usser, even midoraisa. But over here, we just prefer that the prisha be done be'ever mace mishum da'anusu. Here, what are you supposed to do? What do you want me to do? This is what I just learned, right? New information. So the Gemara says they're both Isurei Daraisa. And by Arayos, Tashmish Be'ever Mace is also an Isurei Daraisa. Here, what would you like me to do? So the Gemara says it's an Ones. And Ianusu, Kiparish Miyad, Namini Pater. Anusu, maybe I should have argued, says the Gemara, if what you're telling me is that the reason why we want him to leave Be'ever Mace is because Nebuch, it's an ones. What should I do? It's still an Isser Doraisa, but it's an ones. Then maybe even Prisha Be'ever Chai should be pater. Because why? It's an ones. The whole thing is an ones. So if it's an ones, and you're patering the Isser Doraisa Be'ever Mace, but still an Isser Doraisa by Arayos, then the same thing should be true. You should be pater by an Ever Chai, by a Kishui. Omar le Abaye le'olam e'imalach. You're 100% right. And we're back to our normal learning, so no one should walk away with the wrong information here. Aver meis ba'arayos hara, whatever the case is, that's going to be an isur d'oraisa. V'hacha my time of pater. Over here, why is it that when a man is together with a woman bitara and she's nitmesa in the middle and she says nitmesi, why there is he pater? mishum de anusu, because there's an ones. V'ha de amris ki parish miyad amay chayev. Why is it that we say that they're still chayev in one case but not the other? Listen to this svara. Shahaya lo lifrosh behana'a mu'etes upiresh behana'a meruba. Says the Gemara that what he should have done was to be poresh with hana'a mu'etes, the hana of tashmish amita, when a person is be'ever mace, is less of a hana than a yitzia, than a perisha be'ever chai. And that is the distinction as to why the Torah separated piresh miyad chayev and piresh be'ever mace pater. The ones only kicks in be'ever mace. That's, again, the splitting of the hairs in halacha is b'dakus hachachma. There's no way we could grasp it. How they came to this, I don't know. But the Gemara says that the din of ones only applies by the hana mu'etes of an aver mace. But be'aver chai, it's not true. What? You say something?
Shiur,
Hmm?
Shiur,
Yeah, did I say the opposite? Oh, could be.
Yeah.
What? Okay. Yeah, that's what it says here. So again, just a fascinating distinction. That yes, it's all these Surah D'Oraisa, but once you're right.
There's no third option.
But why is fine? But why aren't you still chayav a korban? You're noticed in both cases. You're noticed be'aver mace, you're noticed be'aver chai.
You could do better. Yeah. You can't do the best. Do better. There's no third option. Better. You could do better.
But the situation is an ones situation. Yeah. You're living in two worlds. You're still an ones.
Do better. It is a little bit. You're still an ones. You could do better. You have to do better.
I'm surprised it wouldn't be a mitzvah to pull away from the 2 months with this one.
We're going to discuss that in a second, actually. The Gemara is going to discuss that in a minute, actually. But I mean, it's still Ever Chai, which is obviously why. It's Ever Chai. That's why we have to make sure that you wait. The Gemara is going to ask that. All of this Gemara is coming up because of a question that we're about to ask now, bringing back to our case when the person became Tameh in the Azara. I remember we were discussing that yesterday. Okay, so that's the Gemara's distinction. Bottom 2 lines of Yud Ches Gerald's question. Amar le Rabba bar Chanan le Abaye im kein matzinu aruka uksara benida. We find that what were his options? Leave as quickly as possible, or don't. So what does the word ktsara mean? Does ktsara mean to leave as quickly as possible? That's a problem. But aruka, spending more time, is usually the isser. That was the isser by the Azara, is that you took the longer route. So here, the derech aruka is the derech ktsara. Here, the longer wait by Tashmish Amita is the way to have the most reduced sentence, because the Prisha Be'aver Mace is the ideal. So the Gemara says, why is it that we don't say in our Mishnah that we learned earlier, by the Azara, there we said Ktsara is the best. So says the Gemara, Ve'anan b'mikdash tanan. We only spoke about the Mikdash. Rashi, Ve'anan b'mikdash tanan, top of Yud Ches Beis. Why wasn't that included? So says the Gemara, because there's an obvious difference between the two. Let's just talk it out and then we'll read it inside. If a person becomes Tameh in the Azara, he makes a beeline for the door closest to him. That's Pashut, or maybe not a beeline. He can take the baby steps according to what we saw yesterday. But it's non-stop movement, constant forward motion, and that's your Derech Ktsar. If you go to the door that's further away, you're Chayav. So we make a distinction over there between Ktsara, shortest distance to the exit, and Aruka. So it says the Gemara that by our case, it's the exact opposite. The Derech Ktsara is Ever Chai, Prisha, Kares. The Derech Aruka is Ever Mace, Shogeg, Korban. So it says the Gemara, Ela mishum de lo dami Aruka dahacha, Ktsara dahasa. They're not the same. The Aruka dahasa is Ktsara dahacha. They're inverted. And the common thread is, how do we avoid Isser? In the Mikdash, we avoid Isser by the closest door. In Tashmish Amita, we avoid Isser by waiting. So that's Aruka Shi Ktsara. So that's what the Gemara says over here. Beautiful. Next, 3 lines down, we'll be going until about 15, 12 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, Maskif lo Rav Huna b'rei Rav Nasan, umi amar Abaye anusu. Does Abaye really hold that we're talking about anus? What is a real case of anus? That's only alma b'shelo samach levesta ka'amrinan. That's only if you're far away from the menstrual cycle, the anticipated menstrual cycle. We're not yet talking about the vestos that we keep. We'll discuss that at the bottom of the page. This person is irresponsible. We're not talking about someone who's this guy is not responsible. This is when she is anticipated to get her period in that spot and that time. This is irresponsible. So he says the only way it could be a real true ones is if it's b'shelo samach levesa kamrinan. How can that be? Va'abaye do amar chayv shtayim. The whole sugya today started on the bottom of Yud Zayin and Beis, where he said you're chayv shtayim. Alma, the only way that can happen, as we've discussed earlier, is b'samach levesa askinon. So miman of shach. If Abaye is the one who says you're chayv shtayim, then you need to be samach levesta. But over here, you're saying that it's a full ones and you're not samach levesta, you can't be chayv shtayim. So says the Gemara, ki itmar da Abaye ba'alma itmar. The line of Abaye in the bottom of Yud Zayin and Beis that we started with, he was just saying in general, it's possible to have two chatos. Details. We're not. He was just painting a picture of where a woman says nitmesi. It's possible to be chayav two korbanos in that place. In that place, the knisa would have to be samach levesta, and the yitzi would have to be be'ever chayav. Fine. Okay, let's continue. Ba minei Rabbi Yochanan ben Yosi ben Lekunya, may Reb Shimon ben Yosi ben Lekunya, seemingly brothers. Azhara leboel nida minayin minatorah. Guys, even we could have answered this one. Normally, when we have azharos in the Torah, we're like, I know there's many psukim about nida in the Torah. I don't know which one's which. But this one, we could have all come up with on our own. So his brother, Shakal Kali, picked up a clod of dirt and he whipped it at his brother. Pasak Bey, what's wrong with you? Azhar lebol nida? Ve'alisha b'nidas tumasa lo sikrav. What is the klutz kasha? What are you talking about? It's like kindergarten. What are you asking ridiculous questions for? Ella, that's not the question I meant to ask you. Stop throwing dirt at me. Azhar lemishamesh im hatahora, the amra lo nitmesi, the lo nifrish miyad minalan. What's the azhara of prisha be'ever chai? What's the azhara for prisha when she says nitmesi be'ever chai? Amar chizki amar kra. This is such an amazing drasha. V'atahi nidasa alav. Her nida should be upon him. Afilu b'shas nidasa tehei alav. Even when she's in nida, he should stay there. We never would have read the pasuk that way. It's not pasuk pshat in the pasuk, but that's what the Gemara says is tehei alav. So that's what the Gemara means is that there are scenarios, and it's counter logical under certain circumstances that if someone were to say, is it better for there to be intercourse in this case or not? So the answer is better. It's better to stay put because you have to make sure that you're yotze, you're porish be'ever mace, not be'ever chai. Says the Gemara, that's the azhara. Okay, ashkechan aseh. You've explained to me the prisha. That's the aseh, the mitzvah to leave be'ever mace. What's the losa aseh minalan? The losa aseh to start the process. The losa aseh to leave be'ever chai. Amar Papa, Amar Kra, lo sikrav nami lo tifroshu. It also could mean don't separate. Tichsiv haomrim krabelecha al tigash. Literally means stay close and stay away. And in this context, the karvelecha is the same as al tigash of don't approach. Ki kidashticha. So what the Gemara is saying is that there's an asay and a lav when it comes to being poresh. You get the asay for being porish be'ever mace, and you get the losa asay for being porish be'ever chai. And a whole host of halachos and agadatas. This one is super practical. That's halacha l'maisa tan rabbanon. The pasuk says in Sefer Vayikra, "V'hizartem es bnei Yisrael mitu mosam." Amar Rabbi Yoshai, "Mikan azhar lebnei Yisrael sheyifrshu min neshosem samach levestan." This is the din that we refer to as vestos, and the halachos of vestos require that we are poresh from a wife who is expecting her period at a certain time. Vikama amaraba ona, one time period. Let's just pause and review some of the halachos here. So let's say that a woman gets her period on Aleph Nisan. So we hold of 3 vestos, and this is Lamaisa. This is how your average local Orthodox rabbi will paskin, that if a woman gets her period on Aleph Nisan, and Aleph Iyar, and Aleph Sivan, she always gets on the same day of the month. So we have 3 vestos that apply. The first is referred to as the Vesas HaChodesh. if she gets her period on Aleph Nisan during the day, we anticipate that she'll get her period on Aleph Iyar during the day. And therefore, you're not allowed to be together during that spot. Now, the Shita of the Or Zarua is a Chumrah, that it's also the slot before. So that means that he would hold, if she got her period on Aleph Nisan during the morning, they can't be together during the morning or on the last night of the previous month. That's also not allowed. That's the Chumrah of the Or Zarua, but Medina, it's only one Ona. That's the Veses HaChodesh. The second one is called the Veses Benoni, which is the average woman gets her period every 30 days. So we had 30 days. It's not always Aleph. It depends if the previous month was Malay or Chaser. And then the third one is called the Veses HaDilug, the interval. How many days has it been between her most recent periods? So let's say that a woman's recent period was 29 days. So she can have a Veses on the Lamed of the month of Nisan, and on Aleph of the month of Iyar, and one of those two would also overlap with the 30th day, which would be Aleph. So these are the three vestos that we are makbid on lahalacha: Veses HaChodesh, Veses Benoni, and Veses HaDilug. Okay, this is the right way to do it. Then you're never held responsible if a woman becomes a nida outside of these times. Chazal protect you. This was what we have to be careful about. Veses HaChodesh, Veses HaDilug, Veses Benoni, then we're done. Good. Amar Rav Yochanan, almost halfway down on Yud Chesim Beis, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Kol she'eno poresh meishto samach levesta. If you don't keep the vestos, afilu havyon lo banim kivnei Aaron mesim rachmana litzlan. There could be a severe punishment. Dechsivi zartem es b'nei Yisrael b'tumasam v'hadabav nidasav v'samach le'acharei mos. The juxtaposition of psukim. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, Amar Rav Yochanan, Kol poresh meishto samach levesta. If we are makbid on vestos, havyon lo banim zecharim, one can be zochet to male children. Dechsiv lahavdol ben atame ben atar v'samach le'isha kisazeh v'yalada zachar. Smichas psukim. Next, 2/3 of the way down. If a person is careful with the vestos, then they will have children who might merit to become dayanim. Next, Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, Amar Reb Yochanan. Anyone who's mavdil on wine on Motzei Shabbos, says the Gemara, Havyan lo banim zachram dechsiv lahavdil ben hakodesh uven achol uchsiv hasam lahavdil ben hatame uven hatar v'samichlei isha kisazriya. Juxtaposition, a similarity of two psukim and a juxtaposition of one. Next, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Omar banim ru'in lehora. How do we know that one can merit having children who can be dayanim? Dechsiv lahavdil ulehoros. He agrees. And lastly, for tonight, and this is a big hashkafa. Amar Rabbi Yamin bar Yefes. Amar Rebbe Lazar, anyone who sanctifies themselves, b'shas tashmish, Rashi says, "Makadesh atzmo b'tashmish derech tznius," which of course is open to interpretation. So then, havin lo banim zecharim, the Sefer Pele Yoetz speaks about this under the header of zivug, and a beautiful Torah over there. Then a person is having lobanim zachram shenamar biskadashtem v'yisem kdoshim v'samech le isha kisazriya, that one will then be zochet by isha kisazriya v'yal da zachar is the rest of the pasuk. What? Banim zachram, male children. What? Oh.
It's written that way all the time. There's a lot
Yeah.
of Jewish, but
There is? Well, somebody was,
Having low.
well, Banim Zachar, you hear it all the
Yeah,
time.
I hear it all
right?
the
I
time.
understand what I'm saying, it is a double.
It is a double. Banim and banos. Just it never crossed my mind. Never crossed my mind. Okay, we're actually going to stop right here, 12 lines from the bottom at Rebbe Lazar Omer Hasheretz V'nei Lamimenu. I'm not here tomorrow night. I'm also not going to be giving shiur Wednesday night. I don't know if we're going to have shiur Wednesday night. We'll probably just not have shiur. But I'm certainly not here tomorrow night. Rabbi Hanner will be giving tomorrow night's shiur. And a looming mazel tov to David Merzel. Because I have an event that,